Behavioral researchers call it the calibrated return window, the 30 seconds after you open your front door, and once you can see it, you can rebuild your dog's entire relationship to being alone. I'm going to show you what home cameras have caught across 30 years of research, including a 2024 Royal Veterinary College finding that rewrote how I greet my own dog. By minute 18, you'll know 3 pre-departure cues your dog is already chaining, which of 2 return styles you default to, and 130. Second protocol you can run before coffee Monday morning. Fix this half minute, you fix the 8 hours. Before we go any further, I want to take one thing off your plate. If you've ever closed the front door and felt that small twist of guilt, that quiet, I hope he's okay in there, none of this is your fault. Home cameras only started rolling on left-alone dogs around 2010. The single most important paper on what we're about to look at came out in 2024. Most owners will never read it. I almost didn't either until my dog Shen taught me, twice. I'll tell you both. Most of us picture the worst version of left-alone behavior as obvious: the howl on the doorstep, the chewed shoe by the welcome mat. That picture is wrong, and the cameras prove it. In 2010, an Italian veterinary behavior team, led by Palestrini, set up household cameras on 23 dogs and rolled tape on what actually happens after the door clicks shut. The averages they recorded are not what most owners expect. Vocalization across the entire absence. About 3 minutes and 15 seconds, scattered not one long howl. Destruction. About 7 minutes total, with the most concentrated spikes between minute 23 and minute 28 after departure, almost always within 6.5 feet, about 2 meters of the front door. 1 year later, a Swedish team, Rain and Keeling, ran a complementary study and added the harder finding. Across their sample, roughly 97% of left-alone time looked, on camera, like nothing happening. Dogs lying down. Dogs at the window. Dogs pacing the same 15-foot line about 4.5 meters between door and couch. And here is what owners pay for, year after year. That silence is the behavior. Cycling without resolution is not a calm dog. It is a dog running an unanswered question on loop. Are they coming back the way they left, or the way that fusses on return? A passive-looking dog is not a settled dog. Sometimes it is the most depleted animal in the room. So if your home camera shows you a quiet dog pause before you exhale, we have to redefine what okay looks like before we can fix it. And the fix does not live in those 8 hours. It lives in 30 seconds you have not learned to see yet. Most owners think their dog watches them leave. The research says the dog stopped watching the leaving years ago. The dog watches the order. In 1982, 2 American veterinary behaviorists, Borchelt and Voith, published one of the first formal descriptions of pre-departure conditioning. They watched dogs of owners who had no separation complaint at all, and they cataloged something quiet and consistent. The dog was not reacting to the door. The dog was reacting to the chain of small moves that always came before the door. Phone check. Shoes. Time glance. Bag. 4 beats in that order, on most weekdays for years. The dog isn't reading any one of them. The dog is reading the sequence. My dog Shen taught me which cue I had hidden from myself. It wasn't keys. It wasn't shoes. It was the zipper on my work bag 2 rooms away, behind a closed door. The first morning I noticed it, I was standing in the kitchen. Shen was in the bedroom. About 10 feet apart, roughly 3 meters through a 12-inch gap, about 30 centimeters under the door, I zipped the bag. I heard a single nail tap the floor in the next room. Not a bark. Not a whine. 1 tap. He had stood up. The order of small sounds had become the prediction. The bag wasn't the danger. The bag was the timer. And here is where most well-meaning advice gets it backwards. A 2014 Spanish team led by Amat tested what happens when owners try to hide the cues. Keys in a drawer, shoes by the back door, the random order trick. For some dogs, the arousal didn't drop. It rose. When the sequence became unpredictable, the dog stopped knowing when the 8 hours started and started running the question all day. Your dog isn't afraid of your shoes. They're afraid you won't come back the way you left. If you set those 2 cameras side by side, you start to see 2 different dogs on left-alone footage. The one on the left cycles, paces, returns to the door, pauses, paces again. We met that one in 2010. The one on the right does almost nothing. And to most owners watching the home camera at lunch, the dog on the right looks like the success story. It isn't always. A quiet dog is sometimes the cycling stopped working. The prediction system has run so many loops without a clean answer that the system gave up trying. That is not calm. That is depleted. Which means the problem on either screen isn't really about the 8 hours. It is a prediction problem. And predictions are made in seconds, not hours. For 30 years, the field studied the wrong door. Researchers watched dogs being left. They wrote papers about howling, about chewing, About the spike at minute 23? They built their entire frame around the moment you walked out. Then, in 2024, a team at the Royal Veterinary College in London ran the numbers on a door no one had measured properly. The door you walk through twice. The study is called Generation Pup. It tracked 145 dogs across the first years of their lives and asked a question almost nobody had asked at scale. When the owner comes home, what do they do in the first half minute? Do they fuss? Do they raise their voice over a chewed cushion, a wet patch, a knocked over bin? Do they kneel quietly? The team coded those returns. Then they followed the dogs. The dogs whose owners reacted with raised voices or prolonged frustration on return, the overreaction upon return profile, were 6 times more likely to develop separation-related behavior than the dogs whose owners came home calm. Not 20% more likely. Not double. 6 times. And here's the part that took me a minute to sit with the first time I read it. The study did not measure the goodbye. The goodbye was not the variable that predicted the outcome. The return was... Behavioral researchers call it the calibrated return window. 30 seconds. The most behaviorally consequential half minute in your dog's day. Write that down somewhere, because once you can see it, you cannot unsee it. You are not failing your dog by leaving. You are shaping them in the 30 seconds after you return. If you have ever come home to a mess and let your voice rise, I have too. The paper that named this came out in 2024. Most owners will never read it. The science wasn't there yet, and now it is. None of what is coming asks you to feel worse about a Tuesday you can't take back. It asks you to see the door differently the next time you open it. Behavior explains the learning. It does not explain the compounding. A single, fussed-over return does not write itself into a dog's nervous system overnight. Something physiological has to keep the score across months. In 2019, a Swedish team, led by Ann-Sofie Sundman, did something nobody in the field had tried at this scale. They clipped hair samples from 58 owner and dog pairs. And from those samples, they measured hair cortisol, the long arc stress hormone. Hair grows slowly. 1/25th of an inch of hair, about 1 millimeter records, about a month of cortisol exposure. Clip about 4/10 of an inch, roughly a centimeter, you have read a year. They ran the numbers on owner cortisol and dog cortisol side by side. The 2 lines moved together, not loosely, not approximately. Across months, in households with no behavior complaint at all, the human nervous system and the dog nervous system rose and fell together, like 2 metronomes on the same wooden floor. The owner's cortisol predicted the dog's, not the reverse. The direction of causation matters. The dog was not stressing the owner out. The owner was setting the dog's baseline. A 2021 South African team, led by Stefan, replicated the direction of causation finding in a larger sample and added the kicker. The effect was strongest in households where the owner's return behavior was inconsistent. The return is not just a teaching moment, it is the writing instrument, which means the 8 hours you've been blaming yourself for are not the cause, they are the receipt. The return wrote the check. You are writing your nervous system into their hair, one return at a time. I want to tell you about a morning I got this wrong, but before I do, there is a piece of psychology I have to put down on the table first, because most of us learned the older version in school, and the older version is what makes a moment like this one feel unfixable. In 1967, the psychologist Martin Seligman ran the experiments that taught a generation the term learned helplessness, the idea that if an animal cannot escape something unpleasant, it learns to stop trying. In 2016, almost 50 years later, Seligman published a revision of his own work with neuroscientist Stephen Meyer. They had gotten the direction backwards. Passivity, the 2016 paper argues, is not what gets learned. Passivity is the brain's default, the baseline state when nothing is teaching otherwise. Agency, the ability to act on a problem and have the action matter, is what has to be actively built, which means a quiet, depleted dog at minute 40 of a left-alone clip is not a dog who has learned helplessness from you. It is a dog whose agency has not yet been built around the door. Which brings me back to that morning. It was a Tuesday. I came home about 3 feet, roughly a meter through the door, and the cushion was on the floor, the good one, down feathers across the hardwood, and I raised my voice, not at Shen, exactly at the room. At the morning, at the fact that I'd planned a call in 20 minutes. Shen was already lying down by the time I'd finished. Not hiding, just lying. If you have ever raised your voice at a quiet animal who couldn't have known why, I have too. The science wasn't there yet. It is now. We get to start again Monday. The fix isn't reaching back into a Tuesday you can't take back. It is the next door you open. Most of the advice you have been given about a dog who struggles alone is aimed at the 8 hours you are gone. That is the wrong 16 hours. Let me run 3 of the most common fixes past the peer-reviewed record calmly, not as a takedown. Myth 1. Get a second dog so the first one isn't alone. In 2021, the Stefan team, the same group from the Cortisol section, ran a sample of 77 multi-dog households. The finding cut against the intuition. Male dogs in multi-dog homes vocalized more when both dogs were left alone, not less. A second dog is not a second presence to the first one. For some dogs, especially adult males, it is a second source of arousal in an already arousal-loaded room. Myth 2. Plug-in diffusers will fix it. In 2010, a team led by Diana Frank published the first systematic review of dog-appeasing pheromone products, diffusers, sprays, collars, the lot. They were not hostile. They simply reported what the evidence showed. Across the available controlled trials, the effect size was much weaker than the marketing implied. Some trials showed a small benefit, several showed none. Not a scam. Just not the load-bearing fix it gets sold as. Myth 3. Hide the keys, randomize the shoes, fake leave 100 times a day. The Amat 2014 paper we met in section 4. When the cue sequence becomes unpredictable, some dogs' arousal goes up, not down. You can decondition a dog. You cannot decondition a dog and confuse them at the same time. The intervention point is not inside the 8 hours you are gone, it is the other 16. Specifically the 30 seconds where those 16 meet the 8. Here is the half minute you came for. The calibrated return window has 3 micro-behaviors. None of them require training the dog. All 3 require decoding what you have been doing without seeing it. 1. Silent re-entry, the first 10 seconds. Open the door. Step through. Close it. No greeting. No eye contact. No, he, baby. The dog is reading the cue chain you taught them in section 4, the order of small sounds. Give them an order with no voice in it. 2. Graduated reunion, seconds 10 through 20. Kneel or sit at dog level. Wait. The greeting does not initiate from you. It initiates from a settled nervous system in the room theirs. Watch for passive posture. A soft tail base, a sit, a lie down. That is the cue you have been training without knowing it. 3. Calm hand on chest ritual the final 10 seconds. 1 flat hand, about a foot roughly 30 centimeters from the back of their neck, resting on the chest. 5 slow breaths. Yours, not theirs. The cortisol synchrony from section 7 runs in both directions. You can co-regulate downward at the threshold the same way you have been co-regulating upward all year. Clinical observation across 2 decades of behavioral veterinary practice. Simpson in 2007 and Landsberg in 2008. Suggests the prediction system updates at roughly 40 minutes of consistent new evidence. Not 8 hours, 40 minutes. That is the unit you are working with. The timer doesn't reset at the back door. It resets the moment you step through the front one. We started this video on the wrong side of this door, so let me close it on the right one. You're not failing your dog by leaving. You're shaping them in the 30 seconds after you return. So, here's the one question I want you to sit with this week. Which return style is yours? The apologizer or the calibrated? There is no wrong answer. There is only what your camera shows. Tell us in the comments. Specifically the first word out of your mouth when you walked in last night. The honest one. Other owners need to read yours to find their own. And this Monday morning before you open the door, count to 30 in your head. Just 30. Then come back next Friday and tell us what your dog did differently by the end of the week. Next time on PetMindLabs, what your dog does in the 90 seconds before you wake up. You'll be surprised by how much of your morning they have already lived.